10 years is a long time, long enough for the sharp edges to soften, long enough for the specific irritations of daily proximity to become theoretical, long enough for the achievements to feel more permanent than the frustrations, long enough to wonder, not every day, not even most days, but occasionally, in the specific quiet of a Tuesday evening, in the particular silence after a solo project that hadn't quite done what the modern talking ones had done. In those moments, wonder what if, not with nostalgia, not with sentiment, just arithmetic, what the combination had produced, what the combination might still produce, what was gone and whether it was gone permanently or just waiting. Those thoughts arrived, for both of them, separately, privately, on different evenings, in different rooms, in different cities. Both carrying the same thought, without knowing the other was carrying it too. That was always how it was with them. Parallel existence, same territory, different rooms, no communication between the parallel tracks. That had been true during modern talking, was still true after it. The separation as clean as the partnership had been, both moving forward, both building separate careers, both continuing, but occasionally the thought, the arithmetic, the quiet question. 10 years is 1987 to 1997. Let's be specific. 1987 was the breakup, the official end of the first modern talking run. Both had moved on, Dieter Bohlen into production, into Blue System, into building a career as one of the most commercially successful producers in German popular music, into proving that the talent was compositional, was his, was separable from the partnership. He had proven it. The work continued. The success continued, different configuration, without Thomas's voice, different sound, still Dieter Bohlen, still excellent, still commercially significant. The proof he needed made Thomas Anders into solo work, into building a career as a performer independent of the modern talking framework, into proving that the talent was vocal, was his, was separable from Dieter's compositions. He had worked at it, different songs, different producers, different dynamic, without Dieter's architecture. Different sound, still Thomas Anders, still professional, still present in the market, less commercially dominant, the proof harder to make, the separation from modern talking less clean in his domain because modern talking had been his primary commercial vehicle in a way it hadn't been Dieter's. The arithmetic was different for both of them, had always been different. They processed the decade differently, carried it differently, arrived at 1997 with different weights. 1997, the year before the reunion, the calendar year in which the call happened, in which one of them initiated, in which the process began that would lead to the press conference and the album and the tour and the second run of Modern Talking. The year in which a phone was picked up, a number was dialed, a voice said something, a pause followed, an okay arrived. The reunion began, but before 1997, 10 years, each of them living those 10 years, each carrying the weight and the achievement and the complicated legacy of what modern talking had been. Dieter in Hamburg, building. Always building. The production work never stopped, never paused, songs for other artists, his own projects, Blue System, the machine of his creative output running continuously. This was how he processed things, through work, through creation, through the next composition and the one after that. The breakup in 1987 hadn't slowed the output, had perhaps accelerated it. Something to prove. The compositions were his, the architecture was his, the songs had been his. Modern talking had been his in the most fundamental way, the way that a building is the architect's even when others have lived in it and loved it. He had proven it through the decade, had continued to produce commercially successful music, had continued to demonstrate that the talent was compositional, structural, separable from any particular voice. That was true, he had made it demonstrably, commercially true, but truth and arithmetic weren't always the same thing, and the arithmetic of modern talking, the specific numbers that those records had done, the specific reach that those songs had achieved, the specific place in the culture that the combination had occupied, that arithmetic was different from what came after. Not worse as music, just different in scale. The combination had produced cultural phenomenon. The solo work produced commercial success. Different categories, both real, not the same. Thomas in his own world, also building, also continuing, also demonstrating, but the demonstration harder, the separation from modern talking less clean in his domain, because the voice that had been modern talking's voice was still his voice, was still present in everything he made, audiences heard Thomas Anders and heard modern talking, the connection inescapable, a blessing and a weight simultaneously. He had built a solo career, had produced real work, had grown as a performer in ways the modern talking framework wouldn't have allowed, had discovered musical territory that required independence to explore. All of that true, all of that real, and also the commercial ceiling lower, the cultural reach smaller. The specific alchemy of his voice over Dieter's compositions producing something that neither could fully reproduce alone. That was also true, also real, also part of the honest accounting of the decade. Both men knew what the combination had been, had lived in the knowledge of it for 10 years, had built parallel careers in the space that knowledge created, had achieved things, real things, and carried the awareness of what the combination had achieved, also real, the tension between those two truths, the decade. This is the story of that phone call, except the phone call cannot be fully told, cannot be precisely reconstructed, because both men maintained silence on the specific question. Every interview, every press conference, every occasion on which a journalist might have asked who called first, who made the first move, who initiated the reunion. The answer was always managed, carefully, through the manager, through the professional language of both parties expressed interest at around the same time. Around the same time, the managed vagueness that allowed neither man to be positioned as the one who needed it more, who reached first, who moved first, who was willing to be vulnerable first, because that's what the question really asked: who was willing to be vulnerable, who needed the reunion enough to risk being told no, who valued what modern talking had been enough to cross the distance and ask for its return. That question never answered publicly, because the answer mattered. Because in the specific economy of their partnership, in the dynamics of composition versus performance, of creative control versus commercial execution, of the person who built the architecture versus the person who made it inhabitable, the question of who called first was a power question, a need question, a vulnerability question, and both men had maintained professional composure for 10 years. Neither was going to reveal vulnerability now, not publicly. Perhaps not even privately, but the call happened, someone made it. Here is what we know: the reunion happened. Here is what we don't know: who started it, and here is what that gap contains. Imagine it was Dieter, 1997, Hamburg, late in the year, November perhaps, the calendar year running toward its close, annual accounting of professional achievement. Dieter reviewing: the solo work had been excellent, was excellent, but modern talking had been something else, had been phenomenon rather than success. The difference between critical mass and adequate performance. The difference between songs that became cultural artifacts and songs that charted respectably. The combination of his compositions with Thomas's voice had produced something neither could produce alone. That was demonstrable, was data, was not sentiment, was arithmetic. Dieter was good at arithmetic, had always been good at arithmetic. The calculation in November 1997 might have been simple. The combination produced more than the parts. The sum exceeded its components. The opportunity was there, the market was there, the catalog was there, the foundation was there. The question was whether Thomas would, whether Thomas was willing, whether 10 years had softened the edges enough, whether the specific frustrations of proximity had become theoretical enough. Whether both of them could operate as professionals within clearly defined boundaries and produce what the combination was capable of producing. The arithmetic said try. The professional in Dieter said try. He picked up the phone, called the manager. I've been thinking about modern talking. The manager, very still, very careful, processing. What about it? Whether there's still something there, whether it makes sense to revisit it. Pause. I'd need to make another call. I know. Dieter hung up, waited. The vulnerability of waiting, the specific exposed quality of having moved first, having asked, having put something on the table that could be declined. That could be answered with silence or with no, the 10 years of professional composure resting on what the other phone call produced. Imagine it was Thomas, 1997, different city, different month. Different arithmetic, but the same conclusion. Thomas reviewing 10 years. The solo work had been professional, had demonstrated the talent, had proved the voice was Thomas's, but the commercial peak had been modern talking, the cultural reach had been modern talking. The songs people still sang, the melodies people still carried, the music that had genuinely moved people in ways that endured. Modern talking, the voice had always been his, had always been genuinely his, but the compositions that made the voice matter to millions, Dieter's, that arithmetic was also clear, also demonstrable, also not sentiment. The combination was what produced the thing that lasted. Thomas had built a career outside it, was proud of the work, but in the honest accounting of 1997, the largest thing he'd been part of was modern talking. The music that reached furthest was modern talking. The collaboration that produced the most was modern talking. Could it be again? Could the edges be soft enough now? Could the distance of 10 years have made professional proximity manageable? Could they operate as the professionals they both were within clearly defined boundaries and produce what they were capable of producing? The arithmetic said. Possibly, the professional in Thomas said possibly. The question was whether Dieter would, whether Dieter was willing, whether Dieter's decade of solo production success had given him enough security to share the credit again, to share the stage again, to share the name again. He picked up the phone, called the manager. "I've been thinking about something." The manager, careful. "What?" "Modern talking, whether there's a second chapter." Pause. "I'd need to make another call." Yes, Thomas hung up, also waiting, also exposed, also having moved first in a way that could be declined. Which version is true? Both versions are possible. Both versions fit the known facts. Both men had reasons. Both had the arithmetic. Both had the specific calculation that led to the same conclusion by different paths. Both had the vulnerability that comes from 10 years of carrying a partnership that produced something larger than either had produced alone. The manager made the second call. Whoever the manager called second heard, "I've had a conversation about modern talking. The other party is open to discussing it." This is where the silence comes in, the silence before the okay, the manager on the phone, the other party having received the information. The information that the person they'd spent 10 years separated from was considering return, was open to it, was initiating, was willing to be the one who moved first. That information, significant, requiring processing, not immediately, not in the first second. The first second was stillness, pure stillness, the shock of something you'd been thinking about privately arriving externally. Through the phone, through the manager's voice, as news rather than thought, as reality rather than arithmetic. The second was calculation beginning, the third second through however many seconds it took, the full arithmetic running, what this meant, what it would require, what it could produce, what it would cost emotionally, what it would cost professionally, what it would give in return, whether the combination was worth the proximity again. Whether the professional excellence was worth the personal difficulty, whether the music they could make together was worth the silence they'd have to manage between the music. Whether the distances and tensions and dynamics and patterns of the first run would repeat in the second, whether 10 years had changed anything fundamental, whether the edges were soft enough, whether both of them were different enough people now to make the partnership work differently, or whether they were exactly the same people they'd always been and the partnership would work exactly as it always had, excellently professionally and with the particular human difficulty that had always defined it. All of that, in the silence before the okay, the manager waiting, holding the phone, not pressing, knowing better than to press. This decision not pressable, this silence required, necessary. Earned. 10 years had to be in that silence, 10 years of solo work and separate lives and occasional arithmetic and the question that never quite went away. The silence was all of that compressing, arriving at okay. When the okay came, flat, clean, professional, the single word that meant I accept, I'm willing, I'll try, without saying I needed it, without saying I was glad, without saying the arithmetic had been running in my head too, without giving the other person the knowledge that both of them had been thinking this, that the call had been inevitable because both of them were already there, just okay, the manager calling back, the reunion beginning, 2 words total from the second party. Okay, and then the conversation about the terms, the practical machinery of the return, the professional structure. But the decision itself, 1 word, after one silence, after 10 years, the press conference, January 1998, the first question about the reunion, what made you decide to come back? The answer, music, the market, the creative energy, the right time, professional language, no vulnerability. No, I called because the arithmetic was clear. No, I heard the call and said okay because I'd been waiting for someone to ask. No truth about the specific human beings who carried a decade of separation to a phone and crossed the distance. The journalist who should have asked, who made the first call, never asked it, perhaps didn't think to, perhaps thought the answer would be managed like every other answer, perhaps chose the professional question over the personal one, the question unasked, the answer unvoiced. The manager maintaining professional discretion. Both parties expressed interest at around the same time. Around the same time, both parties, the managed vagueness, preserved to this day, the question still unanswered, the call still unmapped, the silence still unexplained, the okay still unattributed, the reunion still beginning in the same place all the most. Important modern talking moments always began in the space between two people, in what wasn't said, in the parallel private calculation that produced the same result from different starting points, in the specific human arithmetic of two individuals who built something extraordinary together and couldn't quite let it be over, who reached for it again, one of them first, the other second, both necessary, neither sufficient alone, the way it had always been. The way it would always be, modern talking, the reunion that began with a phone call, that nobody admits to making, that everyone understands, that produced 5 more years of music and one more ending in an enduring catalog that began in 1984 and never quite stopped. The call in 1997, the silence, the okay, the story that can't be fully told, because the person who knows, who called first hasn't said, may never say, the silence also the answer, also very modern talking.